Jimmy?
It's rolling.
Okay, welcome to sprint planning. Now, I'm going to go slightly macro with this here. I'm going to assume you're a new team to Scrum. As I develop with a team as it matures, I generally start easing this back to a point when a mature team, I'll start with the intro and say, what's in the agenda, guys, and call it for the team to tell me what we're doing. But you're a new team, so I'm going to guide you through closely. Also, for the benefit of YouTube, I'm going to give a little bit of a macro explaining what I'm doing. So I'm going to sort of talk from the outside in. So it's going to take a little bit longer than I normally would doing an intro to sprint planning. As you can see here, I've got it normally at 5 minutes, and I try and stay less than 5 minutes to do the intro. But what we're going to do here is a bit of a canned exercise where we're pretending to do the sprint planning. So I'm going to call you out as a product owner. And we'll probably get to the point where I say, right, you're ready to read your stories now. And we would normally have a bunch of user stories here that you would then read to the team. We don't need to do that bit, I'll just explain what it is. Maybe in a future version we'll do that. So here we go. Welcome to sprint planning. This is for team, we're going to call you Team Ming. Let's name it by the product owner. It's all about you, mate. Also, look, it's 11:20 now, so I'm going to tick that off there. We've been going since 11 o'clock, and we'll have this whole thing done by midday. And there's three videos, and this is the second video. So the purpose of a sprint planning session is it takes the assumption that you've done some backlog refinement and the team knows what's coming up. But the business, and you're the voice of the business, Ming, is you're going to present to the team what it is you want the team to look at for the next iteration, for the next sprint. So let's assume that's 2 weeks long. Actually, for this we will assume 2 weeks long. And so you're going to present to the team the higher purpose and the why and the goal of the sprint. We're going to talk through these user stories piece by piece. And then the team is going to work out, based on yesterday's weather, based on what we did last sprint, what we think is reasonable to do this sprint. So we're going to forecast our work. We're going to do some estimating, we're going to look at the high level, and we're going to pull from the product backlog into a sprint backlog, user stories, product backlog items that we think we can achieve. At the end of that, we'll create a sprint goal, and that's what will inform us in our daily Scrum, the 24-hour planning session. And after we've done that, we're going to then task the stories out to what we know at the moment. We know that's going to change, and we know that the process of planning is invaluable, but the plan itself is useless. Things will change, we live in a complex world. So what we're going to do today, here's the agenda, and like I say, normally this is for a new team, it's quite comprehensive, and as we progress and become more mature, I start pulling things away, but for today I'll do the big one. And I'm also, as a Scrum coach, more directive early on, and as the team matures, I tend to step back and allow it to be the product owner's gig, because it's about you presenting to the team what you want, and for the team to self-organise and collaborate, and how are you going to do it. So we've got 5 minutes doing the introduction. Then we're going to do a quick check-in around the table. And the reason we do this is so everyone gets to speak, because science tells us that once you've spoken once in a group of people, you're more likely to speak more often. And it also gets people to breathe, relax, feel safe, socially bond, and also then probably interact better with other people. Then now, this is the most important thing. We're in sprint planning. We're assuming now this is sprint 2 because we've had a sprint before us and we did a retrospective. And as you know, in a retrospective, we as a team agreed to change 1 or 2 different things, so in the next sprint we're slightly better. This is in the spirit of Kaizen. So what I want to do is reinforce that retrospective, so we don't just do the retro and forget about it. It's going to go on the sprint backlog as something that we agree that we're going to commit to doing for this sprint. So we've done the last retrospective. The definition of done, definition of ready. Don't always do this, but usually, if it's an early team, we'll have that on the table and we'll just reinforce, in the last sprint, did we capture everything we needed to for definition of done? And the stories that we did in backlog refinements, do they meet definition of ready? Are they independent, negotiable, estimable, small, testable? That's invest, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. So that's definition of done, definition of ready. Don't always do that, probably will today. Then capacity and velocity. So there we can talk about what was our velocity last sprint? How many stories did we finish? How many story points did we finish if we're using story points? Is it likely that we're going to do better or worse this sprint? So we can ask ourselves, are the same people available? Have we resolved any impediments that we covered? Is anyone on leave? Is anyone likely to be sick? All of these things that we can then capture because it gives us some information of what's reasonable for us to pull in. So I'm going to guess last sprint we did 40 points and we'll ask the team, and we'll either try and challenge ourselves and go a bit harder, or if we fail the sprint, go before. Actually, this is take one, right? We're not doing a second take. It's occurred to me that if the last sprint was a failed sprint, we would probably at this point talk about user stories that the product owner says is going to be at the top of the product backlog and be pulled in again. Let's assume for the moment that it was a successful last sprint and we're onto a fresh product backlog. But that's something to consider. Then it's over to you, mate. So I do this in 5 minutes for the intro, 10 minutes check-in, last retro 10 minutes. These are loose numbers just for guidance. It's not a time box. But from here downwards, the purpose and goal, reading the stories, and the estimating and conversation, and the tasking and wrapping is all yours. Okay? So, the purpose, you would read out, we in the sprint, this team has an overarching goal, a purpose for where we're going. We can look over the horizon and then start to narrow in to what the next sprint's going to be. And you can actually then say, and I think this sprint goal is going to be X. We're going to release this piece of work or get this piece to be ready, potentially shippable. You will then go to reading at high level all of the stories that you think you'll pull in. So let's say we're going to pull in 5 or 6 stories. You just very quickly read through them to remind the team about the conversations that they've previously had with them. Once you've done that, we'll go back to the first story and we'll have a detailed conversation. So you will read it out again as a I want B, so that C. That's one way of doing user stories, not the only way. You will then talk about the acceptance criteria, and then we ask the team to ask questions to clarify. Do you mean this? Does it include this? Can we exclude that? At that point, before we get into too much depth of conversation, we can estimate. Now, I use planning poker, so we can use a poker cards to estimate in user story points. And from that, we can ask questions from the outliers. And that can then unearth knowledge centers, which with certain people may know something that other people don't. And so we can then collate all that together, re-estimate and see where we start to tend. Once we've got to enough stories where we've pulled in enough points that it meets, let's say, 40 points, we can probably maybe do a few more, just in case the team can pull them in, if you've got time. Or you may say, we're running a bit short of time, let's go into tasking them. So that's the what, that's the first part of sprint planning. Then the tasking is the how, and this is where the team will look at each user story and say, well, if that's what they want to do, I'm going to break it down into tasks, typically between half a day and 2 days long, so you can see the flow as they go through the sprint. And we break them into tasks, which even though it's a cross-functional team, there may be areas of specialty. So this is middleware, that's testing, this is development, and so forth, or documents. And at the end of that, we then confirm that we think, when we've tasked it, that we've got the source of the right kind of capacity. It feels still that the user stories are the same comparative sizes, and that the tasks seem reasonable for what we know at the moment. And remember, we're using the word forecast, not commitment, because we don't want the business to believe that we're guaranteeing an outcome. We're just going to make best efforts. So I reckon a couple of hours for tasking, and that's usually totally up to the team, and the Scrum Master's only there if they need them, as is the product owner, just to clarify any questions. Then we'll wrap up at the end, just to make sure we've gone through the sprint goal. We talked about the retrospective again, what the overarching sprint purpose is, and the stories that we're pulling in. And then that's it, you're off. 2 week sprint, good luck, I'll see you at the review.